This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I'm Brian Murray, joined today by Kate Scotchless.
Hello.
And tonight we are doing a Minisode comparing and contrasting Locke Key the TV show with Locke Key the comic book. Now, it's very important, starting right off the bat, that this discussion will have spoilers for all of both of those things. So any comic spoilers are fair game, any show spoilers are fair game. Just keep that in mind going forward. So, Kate, had you ever read Locke and Key before watching the show?
So I read Volume 1 for one of our Book of the Months for the IRCB Goodreads group. And then I watched the show. And then the show inspired me to go back and read some more of the volumes. So right now I've read the first 3 volumes and like half of the 4th. So I'm almost there. The original, that run has, 6 volumes in it? So,
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I watched the show in, I think, 2 days. It's very bingeable. How about you?
Yes, it certainly is. I did the exact same thing. It took me about 2 days to watch the show. I blew through the comics back in 2014 or 2015, I think,
Okay.
and then had not touched them since. So
Did you read
I was almost fresh.
all of the volumes, I'm assuming, but then there's some other volumes that aren't numbered. They're named. Did you read those?
No, I didn't read anything outside of
The main.
I guess what you might call the main storyline.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed those on Hoopla, and I hate when they don't put numbers on those spin-offy things because I want to know where they go in the series. Like, is this really 7-ish? Or, like, because sometimes you never know, like, they come midway through a run.
Yeah, and I think that the last 2 books in the arc are Alpha and Omega.
Okay.
So I don't remember if that volume was numbered or not, but if you're at all familiar with, Greek lettering.
The alphabet, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess what is your overall feelings on this subject before we get too much into the comparing and contrasting?
I love the show. Like, love the show. And I liked the comic a lot when I read it. Now that I've watched the show, so there's less mystery to reading the comic, I don't know that I feel that much pressure to keep reading it. I think I was very inspired to read more of it when I binged the show, and that's what got me through volumes 2 and 3, but I probably won't read that much more of it. I'll finish the volume I'm currently on, but I'll probably get back to it when season 2 inspires me to want to read more of it. I like the writing a lot in the comic. I'm not as into the art, and I felt like the realism of the show suited the story better for my experience of it. Like, I don't know that it's better, like, full stop. I don't want to make that claim, but for me, it worked better than the more stylized art that's in the book.
Yeah, and I'm willing to make that claim. I think that the show was definitively better than the comic.
Yeah. How did you...
I found Gabriel Rodriguez's art to be very lumpy at the beginning. And it does... I do think that as he, drew the same characters over and over again, I liked the art a lot more. But it definitely, at the beginning, they looked sort of like they were made of clay.
Well, and the cartoony feel removes a lot of the spook factor. So I am not a horror movie person. Like, I do not enjoy being scared for entertainment, typically. So this show hit, my peak creep factor that I still find fun, and I would not have watched it alone. If I definitely... it was too creepy for me to handle if I was just watching it by myself. So I like that shivery, fun, scared feeling of the show that I don't get at all from the comic, because the comic is cartoony enough that it doesn't feel scary at all. Whereas I think if you gave it a very, very different artist like Ray Fawkes or something, that you could make it a really creepy comic. It's just a difference in the visuals.
Yeah, definitely. The comic is a lot sillier than the show.
Yeah.
And not just because of the art. Like, the comic takes its time, whereas the show does not. And so the comic tends to
meander.
What I might call screw around a little more. Yeah. And I say that lovingly. Like,
Bode is very much just Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes in the comic. Like,
Bodie.
Excuse me. Bode.
I mean,
the first time they said the name on the show, I was like, hold up. Bode. What does that spell? Bode. There's no Y.
Okay. This is English. If I spelled BASS, I could just claim whatever you pronounce that as was wrong.
Yeah. So that was the first thing that struck me with the show. And then sometimes they do say Bode instead of Bodie. And I'm like, what is it? Make up your mind. Are you just adding a Y for cute factor in the show? I don't know, but I like the name Bode a lot. And so in my head, in the comics, I still say Bode.
So I think it's more like Bode instead of Bodie, like Jeff instead of Jeffrey.
Mm-hmm. Could be.
But
then you need
way,
two E's to make it like stupid, you know? Just like
Bodie.
Bodie. Like an I, just...
An I would have been good.
Okay.
I promised myself I was not going to go down this rabbit hole, and here I am.
It's number 2 on my bullet list. This was the rabbit hole I was burrowing into this conversation with. I like that Bode, which I'm going to die on this hill, is older in the show. I thought that worked better.
Yeah, because in the show he's what, like 8 or 9, something like
that. Yeah.
I think in the comic he's like a hard 5.
Yes, he's very young in the comic, which makes a lot of the things that he does with finding the keys and not being scared of things that any reasonable young child that just witnessed the murder of their father would be horrified of and not doing. And so there's that added to the lack of realism, like pulling me out of it in the comic, where in the show the kids felt very true to life. Like all of them are traumatized in their own way, in very personal ways that they explore, I thought, really well. And then they also are like curious and scared in the ways that you'd be like, yeah, that actually tracks for teenagers and middle elementary kind of, or older elementary, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Locke kids got more characterization in the show.
Yeah, I think every kid in the show did. At least their friends and stuff. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and their friend group was an interesting thing because Scott is like the first teen character we meet when they get to the town. What is it? Matheson, because we can't call it Lovecraft. Apparently,
is that like why? I wonder why they made that change.
My like personal theory is because like Lovecraft was a bigoted asshole. They didn't want to be associated with him.
Fair. That could be it. They did diversify the cast quite a bit too. That was one of the other things in the comic, and I was like, oh, this is an extremely white comic.
Yeah, and ironically, like the one black character in the comic, Jamal, is Sir not appearing in this film.
Right?
It's interesting. They seem to have kind of combined his characteristics with Scott.
Yeah.
Which he's Scott Cavendish on the TV show and Scott Kavanaugh in the comic, and I'm not sure why that was, but...
Brett Kavanaugh, maybe?
Maybe. Speaking of assholes.
Right? They're like, what if we just make this suck less?
But yeah, I like show Scott a lot more than comic Scott, because comic Scott is just kind of a punk asshole.
Yeah.
Like, he's endearing in his own way, but Scott Cavendish from the show is much more like the endearing dork that I like.
Yes, exactly.
And then we meet his friends, the Savini Squad, which are a whole cloth creation of the show, and a good one, in my opinion.
What did you think about the keys in the show versus in the comics?
So it's interesting because the whole not the inciting incident, but the beginning of the show depends on a key that does not exist in the book.
Right.
And there are a lot of keys that exist in the book and not in the show.
So, yeah, that's the matchstick key that's at the start of the show that starts fires. They're like, this is your arson key. You know, the magic key of arson. But I like that the show has fewer keys. I think that works in its favor.
Yeah, I think so. And especially because a lot of the keys that we do see in the comic are just there for like a page or two.
That's exactly it. It feels a little bit of the key of the issue kind of thing versus kind of that ongoing bingeable show kind of feel where it's really going to add up to something. I also like that there's not a key for every problem, that you get a lot more from the kids in the show versus just I found a key that does a thing. Yeah, and a lot of the keys come up. There's a time skip in the book that I don't think is there in the show, where we come to Lovecraft, Massachusetts in fall of whatever the year is, and then the comic ends with the end of the school year in spring. And so there's a time skip in there where it's just a few panels showing like the end of a week. And it's like they're fighting this monster with this key. And then in the next one, it's a different key. And right. It's very much that the magic item finding quest game versus like an immersive RPG. So I also like some of the depictions of the keys much better of like their powers better in the show. The one that you've pointed out in the notes, but is the one that was a major one for me too, was the head key. I thought the version in the show was awesome. It's one of the coolest parts of the show where you literally like that opens a door into their head and then you and whoever you want to bring with you can enter like kind of the inside of your mind. And what that looks like is a reflection of the individual. Coolest concept, works visually extremely well. Whereas in the comic, it literally just tips the top of their head off and then they can look inside of it, like down into the skull, which...
Yeah.
Shrug emoji.
That made it a lot easier to use too. Like in the one of the big plot points is Kinsey removes her fear from her head in both the show and the comic. And in the comic, all she has to do is reach in and pluck out this little monster-looking thing and put it in a bottle, and then it's done. And in the show, she like takes a kitchen knife, goes through the door into her head, and knife fights her own fear.
Yeah, and the fear, it looks like her. It's like a deranged version of her, which I thought was also a lot cooler than just like a gremlin looking thing.
Yeah, it's like her with claws and sharp teeth and all that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I really like Bode's inside of his head with the like the what it looks like in his child brain versus her teenage brain. I thought was a fun distinction with where he's like playhouse, funhouse kind of thing, and she's like a mall basically.
I know, leading into stereotype, but I think it's okay because even in the show, Kinsey was like seriously a mall. And there was something else about the head key that I wanted to say, and I'm totally drawing a blank on it now. In the show. Or in the comic, anything that you don't remember is blurred inside your head. Or, like, you see things in your head as you remember them.
Right.
So,
it's
like,
not a perfect recording.
Yeah, they're trying to find out who the well lady is that Bode keeps talking about. And it's literally just, like, this crayon drawing of an evil witch woman.
Yes.
Whereas in the
And he's like,
show,
that's her!
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
In the show, they're just watching clips from their life, basically.
Yeah. What did you think of some of the keys that existed in the show, but not in the comic?
So I mean, one, I just thought the matchstick key was cool. And that might have just been because of the music that they played when it was being used.
Very good.
Yeah, the soundtrack for the show is incredible, by the way.
Yeah.
The flower key I thought was also kind of cool too, or the tree key.
Yeah. That's the one that causes growth, right?
That's the one that opens up like the hidden storage underneath a tree where all of Duncan's memories were.
Yeah, that scene is so cool. And then they're like looking at these stored memories that, very cool. I do wish we got to see the growth key. I don't know that it's actually called that. I don't remember what they called it. But the key that makes them bigger in the show, that would have been super cool. But I can see why you wouldn't want to bother with that in a TV budget. Although God knows TV budgets are movie budgets now. Thanks, Netflix.
Yeah, I think that would have been cool, and I would have loved to have seen that. So there's they combine a lot of keys into just like what the appearance key or something like that, which is both good and bad because they got rid of the gender key,
right?
Which I thought was interesting.
Yep, good riddance.
I actually liked the gender key. I think that it's a cool concept. I did not like that they made their token gay character obsessed with being a little girl.
Yeah.
That was rough. But this also allowed them to get rid of the incredibly bad skin key.
Yeah.
Like, what were you thinking, Mr. Joe Hill, when you made a key that changes someone's ethnicity?
Yeah, like, and the editors that were like, you know what, this seems great, put it to press.
Let's have this whole awkward thing where Kinsey and Bodhi have to put on magic blackface to go talk to Aaron Voss.
Ugh.
That was very bad, and I'm glad it was struck entirely from the show.
Yeah. I do like, too, the change in the show in the Drowning Caves, where they make it less just an accident of faulty staircase than the kind of boldness of going too deep into the cave. I like the going too deep being the thing and them having to swim out versus the staircase just collapsing on them and that being how they're almost drowning.
And the most awkward introduction of a love triangle you've ever seen.
Right.
Because in the book, Kinsey and Jamal, the staircase collapses, they fall into the water, and they've basically resigned themselves to dying, and Jamal is like, I don't want to die and having kissed somebody. Yep. So Kinsey's like, okay, let's make out for a little bit then.
Just in this freezing cold water, and their friends just hanging on, watching them.
Yeah, including Scott, who we know has a thing for Kinsey.
Mm-hmm. I do like, they make an reference in the comic book to, they're like, what do you think is behind that door? And they make a reference to the conspiracy theory. What's it? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking. Sorry, Xander. I shouldn't have brought this up. Okay. It's the one that I did the Drink Talk Learn on. How am I not remembering this?
You're talking about when they are talking about it being like a former military base, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what that conspiracy theory is called either. It was like the Indianapolis Project or something like that. USS Indianapolis, maybe.
No, it was the conspiracy theory about the park that's there now. And
oh, yeah. I don't remember what that was called either. And
yeah, sorry.
If it comes to us, we'll bring it back up.
Yep.
So, Gabe. What do you think of Gabe as a new character? And what do you think Gabe's deal was?
So memorable that you're going to have to remind me which one Gabe is.
Gabe was the lobster boy. He was the guy in the lobster costume when they were making their horror movie.
Oh, that's right.
The other guy that Kinsey talked about dating, which I thought was much funnier in the show, where she kind of had a thing for Scott and kind of had a thing for Gabe, and then she's like, why don't I just date both of you? You guys talk it over amongst yourselves.
Right? And then they're like, I guess? Doesn't he get a demon stuck to him in the show?
So I was wondering what you thought about that, because I don't know if that's what happened or if he has always been Dodge.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it could be. I that was a thing in the that I noticed in the comics is we find out way earlier about this kind of demonic possession aspect of the Dodge character, because you see it in the Ghost when Dodge uses the Ghost Key or whatever that one's called.
Yeah, it's the comic leans much harder into the Lovecraft of it all, like to the point of actually using like parts of the Lovecraft mythos as part of the show. Like I can't remember which Lovecraftian being they refer to themselves as, but they're one of those things with the hard to say names.
Yeah.
But yeah, we find out very early on in the comic that it's basically a demon doing a ride along that got brought back by Ellie with the Echo Key. Whereas in the show it's
they're
much
like,
later.
we know things can fly out of this door, so the important thing when we open it is to all go really right up close to it. I'm just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
For important plot purposes, we need you to stand right behind me as I open this door.
Yeah, there are certain amounts of stupid things that characters do just to keep the show moving.
But, like, it's okay because you're like, you are unsupervised teenagers, and I remember being an unsupervised teenager, so carry on.
Yeah. Tyler adopting Book Tyler's girlfriend's personality for half an hour was weird.
Yes.
Where he's like, he finally gets the girl he's been pursuing and then goes like, oh wait, no, I'm bad for you. I'm going to be an asshole for no reason. And that was just because the showrunners wanted to have a very awkward Dodge makes out with Tyler scene.
Yep.
Which I guess is a little better than the several story arcs where Kinsey is dating Dodge in disguise in the comic.
Yeah, that's a real weird vibe. I thought that the mom was a lot better in the show too.
Yeah. She was much more sympathetic.
Right, that she's clearly trying really hard, and it's just like they do a good job of showing how traumatized the kids are in the show, of showing her struggles with it and how traumatized she is in the show. And then you see her relapse and you're like understanding of it. And I think we also see her through her kids' eyes by the time they show us that relapse. And so you already have good feelings about her when that happens. And so it's like, yeah, I enjoyed scenes with her more. I love that they cast, I can't remember the actress's name, but as the friend from school that's housing Dodge. That actress in the show was in The Fosters as one of the moms, and I love her.
Yeah. Ellie Whedon is the character's name. I don't remember the actor's name.
Okay. I thought that she did a great job, and the actor who plays her son did a great job in that, where I'm just like, if anything happens to this boy, I swear to God, I'm done with this show. I am so here for him and his like buddy relationship with Bode, which also works better in the show because Bode's older. Yeah,
it's definitely much more fun to watch in that case. Rufus plays a much bigger role in the book than he does in the show.
Yeah.
He's like integral to Bode figuring out Dodge's whole deal in the book.
Well, as we wrap up here, is there anything else that really stuck out to you about either of these, and what are your plans moving forward?
My plan moving forward is definitely to watch season 2 whenever we get it.
Probably next year.
I'm not sure what they're gonna do in season 2.
Right?
Like they blew through like 90% of the book.
Yeah.
Before completely veering in a different direction for the finale. So the finale of the book has not been ruined by watching the show.
Yeah, because the show needed to leave it much more open-ended so that they could have a season 2.
Right.
And do you think you'll go back and read those side stories now in the comics?
Probably. I'm definitely gonna read World War Key when that starts coming out.
Is that a new thing coming out?
Yeah, that was confirmed in 2019 at San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, cool.
So it's going to be sort of like looking back on Key House during the war, like different wars.
Oh, that'd be super cool.
Yeah. Let's see. It says here that it's supposed to be kind of a prequel and a sequel to the original run, so we might get to see little glimpses of like what happens after the events of the show, or the main continuity. But yeah, that's supposed to start coming out in August of this year. I'm not sure if August is the date it was pushed to because of the whole COVID-19 thing, or if it is going to be moved somewhere else from there.
Yeah, and sometimes a lot of publishing schedules are being changed right now because of not wanting to launch at a very inopportune time. I've noticed that with a lot of titles that I was tracking, so who knows?
But yeah, that should be coming up, and it's going to have a Sandman crossover for those interested.
Wait, Sandman's still going?
Yeah, I've never gotten into Sandman, but I bet that's a selling point for somebody.
Huh. I just saw on Audible that they're doing like a Sandman like radio drama kind of thing for Audible that I think is supposed to be like a radio version of the first trade. Don't quote me on that it's of that specific thing. It was like, you're a nerd. Here's what we recommend to you. You probably care about this. And I was like, I'm not going to click on that, but I acknowledge it exists. So very little info, but there you go. So, yeah, I don't know. I've read a couple volumes of Sandman. That's one of those series that's one of those things that, like, you're into comics, so you must have read all of it, that I just have not read much of. So
maybe that'll be our next minisode. Brian,
there you go.
Sandman.
Next time we're all stuck in our homes for endless hours, we'll just all binge that.
Yeah, in the meantime, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Brianhead. The show is at IRCB Podcast. Kate is at KG Scotchlist, though I know you don't post much.
No. This show and our many subscriber-only episodes are powered by fans like you on Patreon, so join now at patreon.com/IRCB Podcast. If you haven't already, please rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can also join us on our Discord at ircbpodcast.com/Discord, and make sure to tell a friend or two about the show. Thank you, Infinity Shred, for doing the music. You are the best band in the universe. Thank you, Xander, for editing the show. You are also the best band in the universe. And thank you, the listeners, for tuning in. Thank you, Kate, for joining me on this episode. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.